Feels like we're doing live TV. We are live now, apparently, AK Blakemore. We are live. I'm going to wait and see when the comments start coming through to say that we're really live, so that
Okay.
I really believe it. And I'm just going to check. Have you got something sparkly on the go? Because I have.
Something
I'm
sparkling on
here
the
with my no secco.
go. You're so much more high def than me. I'm just using my little laptop camera. I quite like
I'm on
it.
my
It's
laptop
like I'm
camera.
dead and I'm communicating with you from the depths of Hades.
I
Something like that.
believe we are live. Nobody said that we're live, but I do believe we are live. So I'm going to begin by congratulating you on your Desmond Elliott Prize win with the incredible Manningtree Witches, which I am so excited I can now actually talk about because I haven't been able to throughout the whole process. Huge congratulations. How does it feel?
Really, really surprising. I did not expect it at all. It was kind of the long listing was like, okay, cool, nice. The short listing was like, okay, cool, nice. I thought that would be as far as it would get, which I guess you kind of need to from a self-preservation perspective. You can't start, counting your eggs. And it's just really, really lovely, and an honor considering I haven't read all of the long list or short list yet, but I'm planning to, and even just based on the quality of the books I have read, like a delight to be counted among that group of my peers.
I think as the judges, we all said we were incredibly lucky with the long list of books that we had, but also incredibly unlucky because of the then mission that we had, although we found an amazing shortlist and an amazing winner. Because honestly, I've been saying to you this before this went live, this is going to be a book I'm buying a lot of people and we'll be talking about a lot for the rest of the year. I wanted to ask you about where the idea to write about the Essex witch trials and the Manningtree witches came from, because the book is based on historical fact. Where was that kind of first interest lie? Where did the magic spark?
So it's actually my dad lives in Manningtree. So I'm up there a few times a year, like for Christmas and stuff, going to visit him. And it's kind of one of those, it's the smallest town that still counts as a town in the UK. It's about an hour out of London, not far from Colchester, as is mentioned in the book. And it's kind of one of those sleepy little English towns where I think kind of the only other things of historical significance really that have happened there are the men of Manningtree joined the Peasants' Revolt, and it's mentioned in a Shakespeare play. Oh no, the pigs of Manningtree are mentioned in a Shakespeare play, not Manningtree itself. A fine Manningtree hog is a line in a Shakespeare play. And the Witchfinder General. So the interest kind of grew from there, sort of digging into the local history of it. And I think perhaps when I found the trial records and things online, my interest was kind of augmented by the immediacy of the places, the fact I knew the streets, I knew the places they might have lived, these women. And, I've been to the Red Lion, which is still there and has been there since, I think, the 1620s, this pub.
Wow.
So, I've had a drink in the places they would have had a drink, or certainly passed by in the street. So yeah, that was where it came from. Proximity.
Well, because the book sort of focuses, it's really about a community of women at that time, but we focus kind of in on Rebecca, who is the daughter of Bedlam West, which is a brilliant name. And how did Rebecca kind of come to you as a character? And was kind of she the key into the story, or how did all of that work?
Absolutely. So reading the trial records, Anne and Rebecca West jumped out at me immediately, this mother and daughter pairing. And also because this idea of them living alone in Manningtree, and sort of the dynamic for their relationship kind of suggested itself to me as an idea straight away. But also, don't know how to put it. there's kind of like, without sort of spoiling too much, there is a central, and there's some debate among historians of this time period about precisely what happened to these two women, and how sort of the historical facts that we know add up. But there's a kind of central drama there that is a bit of a sort of mystery based on the evidence we do have of what ended up happening to these women, that I wanted to kind of plumb with a B. Yeah, so yeah, I like, kind of all we really know about her is she's described as Rebecca West, maiden, daughter of Anne West. That's kind of the one line that we have. We know really nothing else about her except that there's no record of her execution. Yeah.
That's really interesting. So did that kind of, in a way, for you as a writer, give you kind of that blank page of her to fill in as you went? Not there being, well, there not being too much information about her. I guess that must be quite liberating, because in some ways, if you're writing a historical novel, you've kind of got to stick to history, and that kind of will give you boundaries.
Well, yeah, this is what I think. In some ways, some of the reasons we perhaps have so much historical fiction about nobles and royalty is because there are exhaustive records of where they were and what they were doing on any given day. But working class women from the 17th century are a bit more of a lacuna with regard to historical record. But actually, I probably had more to go on for the Manningtree women than a novelist trying to write a book about working class women in the 17th century would have had, from the trial records, which obviously, are highly sensationalized. It's impossible to pick out what were lies, what were not, what were lies that were said in court, and what were lies that were later embellished by a Grub Street press man trying to sell pamphlets about the trials. But you have a really good starting point there in terms of even trying to unpick that, trying to suss out, based on kind of the slander of a woman's neighbors, what the woman herself was like, which I think was quite a fun key.
I was going to say, that sounds like loads of fun, like trying to work out, like, what are the motivations for why somebody would say that about someone, or why someone would declare someone a witch, or all of those things. I think that must have been really, really, I don't know, I imagine really exciting, and you get a chance to play as you write.
Hugely. Yeah, exciting. And also just in terms of the poetry of these kind of accounts was something I was really attracted to. There's a brilliant way that these people had of expressing themselves that has sort of, most of them were likely illiterate, but they had a real poetry to their rhythms of speech, to the images they used. There's a really great incident I've talked about a fair amount, but it just sticks in my memory, of what a local Manningtree woman on Easter Sunday. She's just sitting by the fire, and all on a sudden she finds her clothes and her person so covered with lice that they could have been swept off her with a stick. And this is one of her neighbors talking, who witnessed the incident, talking about it, and it's just such a powerful, actually quite funny image, that yeah, I just had so much kind of raw material to work with and to work upon. Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because one of the things that I love so much about the book is the fact that it's got some incredibly funny parts, incredibly moving parts, incredibly emotive parts, but there is a lot of almost wicked humor, dare I say, quite a lot. And what you really get into is, like, these women come fully formed, you can see the dirt under their nails, you can really get a sense of, well, you can even sort of smell them through the pages. How did you go about making that world so vivid? Because I genuinely believed I'd spent time with these women as it went on, and that actually made the book all the more poignant as I read on.
Oh, thank you. It's a really kind of prosaic answer, but it deeply helped that I knew the place. Just in terms of knowing the layout of the streets, that is probably pretty much in central Manningtree the same now as it was then. being able to orient these characters to corners I knew, to shop windows that are more or less unchanged apart from what's inside them, things like that. I think kind of freed up my energy to work more at the detail than the kind of fine wash. And yeah, I mean, I for the characters themselves, I'm fortunate to have lots of weird and filthy women in my life who I think I drew upon to a greater or lesser extent. My flatmate, my godmother, my sister, my friends, and yeah. So there's a lot of different women within them.
And how important was it for you to have that sort of humour and throughout? Because, you know, it is, witch trials are never a happy story, obviously, because of what's happened. And actually that will lead on to another question I want to ask you about. But yeah, how important was it to you to keep that humour? Was that something that were you thinking of a reader in mind, or was that something as well that was for you as you were writing?
I don't trust anything that isn't funny. At least a bit. Like, I sort of self-seriousness really pisses me off. So I think it's sort of just my impulse as a person is against sort of seriousness or overbearing seriousness, at least. But also, I think, again, drawing on the source material, these women were very funny. You get a sense of that. There's this great moment in the trial records when I think it's Mother Clark, who she's asked what form the devil came to her in, and she says a man. And John Stern, one of the men who's interviewing her, says, a man like this one here, and then gestures at the Witchfinder General, and she says, oh no, much better looking than him, to paraphrase. And, you know, you get the sense of this kind of sarcasm and this wit, to the point where it would have felt like you were doing the source material and the women whose lives were the source material a disservice if you made it sort of dour and boring, frankly.
Was there a kind of, with the book, you mentioned the women who obviously are in the records, and in some cases just a name, or, you know, someone very little is known about them. How much did you think about, like, the fact that you were giving them a voice, and did there feel like any pressure on you from the past, in a way, from these women to kind of do them right because they haven't had that voice?
Yeah, I think so. In the sense, I mean, perhaps it's kind of less about the women themselves, but to do kind of full justice to the process of othering that was done to them, and without being too heavy-handed about it, wanting to stress the continuities between processes of othering that are put in place in the furtherance of political projects today. And I don't kind of mean the we are the daughters of the witches you could not burn kind of stuff. I think what witch trials illuminate for us goes a lot deeper than kind of sort of like facile girl boss feminism.
Yeah.
So that was something that I was very conscious of. And also wanting to foreground class and disability, and how much those were factors within witch hunts, which it felt, you know, I've read, you know, witch hunt fiction, it's a subgenre unto itself at this point, but I felt hadn't really been done in a way I felt satisfied with in the witch hunt narratives I had read before.
Right.
So that was something I was really interested in doing. Yeah, I suppose I didn't feel a pressure in the sense of, oh God, these people have ancestors and I want to get it right. Yeah. I did have a brief period where I was worried I was going to be haunted Like, it was when I was writing Johnny's, I was like, holy shit, if there are ghosts, they're coming for me. Like, tucked up in the guest bed in Manningtree. Like, don't leave me alone, John. Yeah. And you know, I guess it's still possible that they're out there.
Well, we'll move swiftly on before we start.
Yeah.
But another thing that myself and Chitra and Lisa really, really loved was the way that the book, one, it's a ripping yarn. Two, it's absolutely beautifully written. Even when it's like grimily beautifully written, it is absolutely beautifully written. And we love the fact that also this book kind of really sings to the now, and actually how that we like to think things have changed, but actually you look at poverty and class, as you mentioned, you look at what it's like if women are seen to be too independent or different, you look at just difference in general. When you were writing it, was that something that you were aware of, and did you want to riff on that, or was that just sort of a additional extra, as you were for us as readers?
I didn't kind of intentionally try to like make like neat little parallels, which like if you're a reader you might be like, oh, Boris Johnson, or like anything like that.
I was thinking more of Theresa May at some point.
But so it was weird because while I was writing it was when, or you know, while I was writing part of it was when all the proroguing of Parliament stuff was going on. So for some reason the Civil War was in headlines a lot again. Kind of, you know, Boris Johnson's Roundheads coming for the, like all of that. And I was kind of thinking about this the other day, where I got asked this at the first live event I've done in years, like last Friday. And interestingly, I think what I took away most from it is the fact that the Civil War period is massively underwritten about and massively underexplored, I think, in fiction and film, despite it being such a formative part of our national history and in European history. The French Revolution arguably couldn't have happened without the English Revolution, the American Revolution. It changed the world. And yet there's a tenth of the blockbuster film, book, anything material about the Civil War than there is about Henry VIII, which obviously is important in its own way and also far more glamorous. But I think what I took from it is thinking what elements of British history are important to our kind of national mythos and what aren't. And I think the Civil War isn't, because it is really ugly. It's part of our history we don't really want to look at because there aren't any heroes. King Charles isn't a hero, but neither's Cromwell. Cromwell was a murderous, genocidal imperialist. So it's this part of history that, beyond kind of Roundhead parliamentarian references, the odd floppy hat and Hammer horror films about Matthew Hopkins, we don't really have much cultural exposure to or learn about. And we should, because it's fascinating, but also kind of there was proto-socialism going on then, and kind of key debates about what parliamentary representation and democracy meant. All these ideas were kind of forged in the crucible of the Civil War. So yeah, I kind of think what I took away from it was almost that we don't, by and large, most of us know enough about the Civil War to be able to be drawing parallels with our own time, and perhaps we should. Yeah.
Really, and maybe there are more than, you know, as a reader I was making certain possibly more obvious ones, I guess. But actually, if we looked into it more, there would be even deeper ones, which would be quite depressing. So let's move on to some happy. One of the things that I absolutely loved, and again, it's what we all loved, all three of us judges, was and it's the reason I asked you how long, like where the idea came from. It felt so assured, this novel. It did not feel like a debut in a lot of ways. We described it as kind of, we even compared it to Mantell, which I've told you is no pressure, but because it just had this real assured nature. The characters were so fully formed. The writing was so beautiful, as I mentioned. Was that because you had been thinking about it for quite a long time and been embedded in that area? And also, how much did research play into that? Because I think what you do brilliantly is clearly you've really researched it, but you'd never show off that research.
Whenever someone says like assured debut novel, I always think of like the alternative to that, where it's a debut novel where at the end of every chapter they just like write "sorry" in italics or something like that. Yeah, there were definitely some bits where I was trying to show off my research. The list of books in Hopkins's library, like, that took me weeks. But no, thank you. Because that is definitely a thing that, I mean, I love historical fiction, but one of the things that always gets my back up, that like rubs me the wrong way when I'm reading it, is that kind of, when a character mentions something completely irrelevant to the plot for no other reason than the author wants you to know that they're aware of it.
It might be. I would compare it with like sometimes you'll get a paragraph on a doorknob or a light switch, and you're like, why would the character care? They'd use it all the time.
It's like, I touched the doorknob that was assembled in the style of the late Victorian period, and yes, that thing. So I'm glad. Yeah, I think being aware of it perhaps helped me avoid it. And I don't know. So I think coming to writing a novel from writing poetry, there were elements of writing prose that I was fairly assured I would be fine with. And like, I think as a poet, or the kind of poet I am at least, you have kind of a decent sort of sense for the cinematography of things.
Right. Okay.
Like when I was imagining scenes, I imagine them as I would a scene in a film. And kind of having a confidence on things like color and texture and the sound of words and how those work together. So I knew I wouldn't have an issue with that. The main thing I suppose I was worried about was plot and the kind of organization of the story, which was not something that poetry prepares you for.
Well, I was going to ask, like, how, obviously it's a very, very different way of writing poetry and fiction. And although I think a lot of the times the way it can cross over is under discussed, I guess that's a very, very unacademic technical term from me, but you know what I mean. How, as a poet, what were the kind of how tricky could it be at points, but also how did you use poetry to kind of overcome certain elements of fiction, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
How was the transition, I guess?
Firstly, it was really fun because I've been writing poetry for quite a long time, and I think I got to the point a bit where writing poetry didn't really feel fun in the immediate for me. So transitioning to prose. And when I started the Manning Tree Witches, I didn't really have any idea of it being something I would attempt to get published or like submit to public. You know, it was play. Really, it was because I wasn't writing poetry and I wanted to be writing something. So I had this idea and I kind of ran with it. And obviously what I wrote then is incredibly different from what the finished product has ended up being. But it was, I think, you know, it was kind of a weight off me to be writing something without publication in mind when I began. And yeah, I think the fact that it was historical fiction was kind of the key to alleviating my anxieties around the idea of writing a novel, because there was a plot there and waiting for me. You know, obviously I had to fill in a lot of blanks, but there was already like a skeleton.
Yeah.
There was a beginning, a middle, and an end that I had already to work with. It was just a question of getting from one to the other and adding some flourishes along the way. So I think it was kind of the ideal genre to make my crossover.
Well, I'm very, very glad you did. And a final question before I let you carry on celebrating is, dare I ask, what is next? Because we cannot wait. That was another thing that we all said. We were just like, I can't wait for like not just the next novel, but novels.
Yeah, I'm working on novel number 2. I'm writing a little bit of poetry again, but dribs and drabs, and they're all not brilliant in my own estimations. But yeah, working on novel number 2. I think I'm probably about a third of the way through, which sounds like quite a lot, but I'm writing at the pace of like 200 words a day because I also have a full-time job. So it will probably be a very long time. And the last one took research, but this is taking like research in capitals. I am learning a foreign language.
Wow.
So yeah, it will probably be a while coming, but I'm really, really enjoying it, and it's quite disgusting.
That makes me want to read it all the more.
Yeah, it's a greasy little novel so far. But yeah. I hope you enjoy it when it eventually comes.
I cannot wait for your greasy little novel. That's what I'm going to call it from now. I just want to remind everyone, please, please, please get your hands on the Manningtree Witches. It's absolutely incredible. Get it from your libraries, get it from your local independent bookshop. Just get it because it is
that way.
Amazing. So yeah, make sure you get that book. Thank you so much for joining me, Akeley. Like, I can't speak, and I'm on Prosecco, not Prosecco. So thank you so much for joining me, Akeley Blakemore, and a huge, huge, huge congratulations to you again. I hope this is the beginning of an incredible career in novels. I can't wait to read everything that you write in the future, and I wish you the best of luck with it. We shall both go, but I'll be back on Saturday with another video, and in that time I expect all of you who've watched this to have gone and got yourself a copy, because that's how much I love it. You're going to get bored of me talking about it in the second half of the year. But seriously, congratulations, and thank you so much again, AK.
Thank you so much for having me, and yeah, enjoy the book if you read it.
They will. Oh, they're incredible.